appreciate you allowing me to interview you today. It means a lot. You led my fiance's naming ceremony, which is important. So, in that regard, I feel like you're an important leader within our spiritual journey. And so, I appreciate you. If you want to go ahead and give an introduction, that would be.
Yes, my name is uh, Miguel Angel Ometochtli Nezahualcóyotl. Nahua, I say, Nejo no toca Ometochtli Nezahualcóyotl. Myself, I'm a student of the ancient culture of Central Mexico. We can say the Nahua, not the Aztec, not the Mexica, the Nahua people that spoke the Nahuatl, mainly the highlands of Central Mexico. That's the culture.
So, what's the difference between Nahua, Mexica, and I've heard other things
As
like
Aztec,
Puerto Petra, Aztec?
Puerto.
Yeah, what are the differences?
This is a very important question, Dylan, that you're asking, because I think we are starting a new era, a new time, and the paradigms changing, the names, things that happened before, stay before, and we need to move forward. And long time ago, somebody tried to study the people that they call the Aztecs, and the name is stuck in the old people of Central Mexico. But actually, what the ancient people say that Aztecs were many people that come out from maybe California or Arizona, went down to Mexico, but there were many tribes, not only one. At some point in the middle of the way, they changed their names. They split, they separate the Xochimilcas, the Tlaxcaltecas, and one group, his leader, his name was Mextli, and for him, they took the name Meshi, and then Mexica. So originally was a group of people that they come from a cave, seven caves that they call themselves Aztecs for Aztlan, but then one they split and one group called themselves the Mexica for his leader. They settled central in the place that we call now Tenochtitlan, Mexico City. They settled over there
Where the pyramid is.
with the main Tenochtitlan, the main pyramid. But when they come there, that place was already inhabited for at least 3,000, 4,000 years before. So you see?
Inhabited by who?
Well, inhabited by other people, ancient people. Mainly, I'm from Mexico City, by the way. I'm from Mexico City. South of Mexico City is a volcanic area. It's called now El Pedregal. So that's the pyramid of Cuiculco, right there next to the University City. If you're in Mexico City, you should go. It's beautiful. Next to the UNAM, we call the UNAM, and still the pyramid. It's a circular pyramid. It's huge, 2,000 years ago. Then the volcano explodes and cover the pyramid, like in Pompeii, like in Italy.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. So
and then so they got dug back up, and then it was still intact, or was it put back together?
Mostly intact. The pyramid is a circular. So that pyramid could be like 2,500 years ago, because those people, when that eruption happened, they moved to Teotihuacan, and they start building Teotihuacan. So that's what the archaeology says.
So the Nahua people refers to just the overall. You all came from the same root, and so that's what you mean when you say you are Nahua.
Yeah. So when we talk about
it would be like for the movement in North America, how we refer to ourselves as indigenous.
Yes.
Right? Is that kind of what that would be, the South American version, or Mexico, Central American? So Nahua would be like how we use indigenous up here, or is it indigenous because I feel like encompasses everyone, including Central America, South America, indigenous people?
Yeah, it's called indigenous, but the only thing is that the Nahua became the most strongly and much talked language in the Central Mexico. So that's why we still call Nahua, but it's a lot of people even in Central America. And we inherit that language maybe from the Shoshone. They are Yuto Nahua speakers. So they went south, and you find the Nahua speakers all over Mexico, but mostly in Central Mexico. But the most research, they say maybe 600 AD. the first Nahua people start coming and settle down. Other arc that since the beginning of Teotihuacan, that was maybe 2,000 years ago, by the year zero, uh, that's how the Nahua people. So we don't know what the other people spoke. Like, for example, in the year the 100 year when like 2000 years
AD
ago,
or like BC type of.
in the year zero, how you
Okay.
say, when the era
Yeah,
starts.
so zero that would be after AD,
See,
after I forget what disciple I
yeah,
think is what that stands for, but
before Jesus Christ time, or
yeah.
before they change the names, right? Before our era. So in the year zero, right, 2000
Mhm.
years ago, 3,000 years before that, which is now 5,000 years, the Olmec culture was in the highest beginning.
Mhm.
So we're talking about 5,000 years of civilization, and we don't know what kind of language that people spoke.
So where did the Nahua migrate? The Nahua language migrate from?
We think that from here, from North America, the
Mhm.
Shoshone, Cheyenne, Utah.
Because that's interesting because I just interviewed an anthropologist named Dr. Sean Milanovich,
Mhm,
and he's Cahuilla, and they're out of Agua Caliente in the desert in Southern California,
mhm.
and he's a linguist, and they speak similar languages to a lot of South
Utah,
American tribes.
Azteca.
And so part of their creation story is they have a migration story where they migrated down all the way to Guatemala and back up.
Mhm,
So that would kind of like reinforce the idea that,
mhm.
which also contradicts modern day anthropology because um, they're trying to say that everybody migrated from the land bridge, but it doesn't really match up with any of our creation stories or any of our histories, like you're saying now, because the land bridge was melted down at that time, which is
Mm.
interesting. It wasn't frozen over.
Yeah, some
Yeah.
people say that even Alaska come from means the place where you sleep for the ice. Or
Mm.
Seattle, C is one, Aro, agua, uno agua, Seattle. Even Michigan, the land of the fishes. Because that's the beginning of Nahua, but you have to understand that the languages changes. Like the English changed for the time and enrich and take borrow from other languages. The same
Mm.
the Nahua, they borrow from many languages, right?
Mm.
So, but for sure, by the year 1000 DC, 1,000 years ago, the Nahua was a well-spoken language all over central Mexico.
Mm.
So then the Aztecs or the Mexica came down to Mexico, to central Mexico, by the year 1200, 200 years later. So they come come with the Nahua language, but enrich they were enriched by that language. The language
Mm.
was already very different in central Mexico,
Mm.
because it was more refined, the
Mm.
Nahua, and the Mexica people learned that language.
That's interesting.
Yeah, but at the base it's the same thing, the roots, because the anthropology, maybe he's right. Migration was up and down, no
Hmm.
only one way.
Yeah, they said where they migrated around the world, but around the world meaning their world,
The four
not
corners.
like China or whatever. Yeah, the four corners.
Yeah, like the Hopi, they migrate to all points and then come back. That's, I believe that too.
Hmm.
Yeah. So that's the Nahua languages. It was like, I put an example, but mostly after the year 1000 AD,
Mm.
right? Not before. Before we don't know. We can assure. No, I read books. Nobody can assure that Nahua was spoken before BC.
Mm.
After maybe 600 years, after 600 years DC, yes. By 1,000 years DC, it was well spoken, right? And then when the Mexica came, they spread it more. So the Nahuatl was like the English right now. Everybody speaking English all over the world.
Hmm.
So you can communicate if you don't speak Chinese. You can communicate with the Chinese through the English, right?
Hmm.
So Nahuatl was the same language. It's called lengua franca. And like the Latin, in Jesus Christ time, the Latin was everybody spoke the language. So that was the Nahuatl too.
That was in Nahua as well.
In central Mexico, and I believe even here in the north, that's how they communicate, through Nahuatl. The people that had knowledge, no, the people, right? The people that do the commerce, and the business and the politics, they communicate. They have to know Nahua. They have to know.
Well, we did have trade routes from the south all the way up to the north,
Mm-hmm.
and from if what I understand from that history, the person who established those trade routes, it began in Central America, and then they brought those routes up all the way to the east, the eastern tribes in America, and so yeah, if we're going to be trading all over, I would assume that we would have some type of central language that everybody at least understood.
Yeah.
That'd be interesting to find out if that was Nahua or if it was something, maybe an earlier version or a mixture of multiple languages.
Mhm. At least in Central Mexico it is, and for sure also in this place, Chaco Canyon. I visited. I don't know if you know Chaco Canyon is a big complex. Started in 800 DC and over 1200. Many people argue that the Mexica people, the Aztecs, come from those places, immigrated south. But they find out they had cacao in their bowls,
Mm-hmm.
so they have a very strong commerce. Central Mexico, cacao, chocolate from Guatemala, Mexico, and feathers or quetzal and papagayo. So and they bring the two coasts down south.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So, what is the Nahua culture today?
That's very interesting. Is survive in mostly in four places. In la Huasteca de San Luis Potosí, they spoke in Nahuatl, la Huasteca. They call it variations. They're similar, but they pronounce different. And then in Puebla, there's another huge speaking Nahua people. And then in Mexico City, south of Mexico City, is a place that it was close to the Tenochtitlan.
Mm-hmm.
So after the conquest, many of the ancient Mexica people they moved south to south of Mexico City, and then the Nahuatl survives.
So the indigenous people of Mexico and South America, they're treated fairly badly, roughly, right? Is that true still today? Where there's a lot of racism with
What do you mean?
um so for indigenous people in Mexico,
Uh-huh.
how are they treated by like the government or people who don't identify as native? They identify as the Mexican people. Who how do they treat people who identify as native or indigenous?
After the conquest, after
Well,
the invasion,
even now.
very bad. This discrimination there's no they weren't allowed to commerce in certain areas, and they weren't allowed just to commerce certain items.
Mm-hmm.
It's restricted. It was you mean we call the viceroyalty, the 200 years of the Spanish rule. That's the period you're talking about.
Well, I'm talking about well, even today. So yeah, that started about in the 1500s. If I'm understanding histories, that's when the Spanish came down to
Mm-hmm.
South America and started at least actually in the late 1400s, and then they came in and that's when they did the same thing that they did to native tribes in the North America, which is they set up missions
Mm-hmm.
and they set up boarding schools. Even they're trying to basically bring Catholicism to the indigenous people. So, if I have an understanding, we have a very similar beginning in that regard. But I'm talking post that period. So, for example, after the Spanish were in North America,
Mm-hmm.
we had then the British that came and they had manifest destiny where they basically stole all our lands. They were killing us. They were wiping out our food sources, and then they just basically colonized us,
Mm-hmm.
right? So after the Spanish brought the missions to you guys, where they were also murdering you, what fast forward after the Spanish, what's happening? What is that looking like?
Well, I can say is when something happened to you abruptly and destroy all your cultures,
Mm-hmm.
and then when you wake up, you ended up like no paz. The situation that you described is similar but on different times. I
Mm.
studied that period very well because I do my thesis about the Mexican-American War in the Southwest. So the colonization of Mexico, it took 300 years. No, it wasn't fast. It started in Mexico City, in central Mexico, Mexico City, uh, Puebla, all those peoples around. The core of the civilization in central Mexico. By 1600, they were defeated, and they moved. 1700, they moved by up north, Zacatecas,
Mm.
and then 1800s they reached Chihuahua and started to conquer, which is Texas. But when they faced the Comanche and the Apache, the Spanish were stuck in a hole.
Mm.
It's a story that we don't know. Actually, the Cherokee defeat the Spanish, and the Spanish has to pay rent to the Cherokees. So as the story goes that the Spanish defeat the whole continent, and you see maps that the Spanish Empire, that's fake, that's false. The Spanish, they couldn't control Texas. They built over 28 missions, and only 3 missions survived in a period of 150 years. They never colonized Texas, right?
Right.
So it's different. But when they went down on New Mexico, that was another story, right? New Mexico was conquered in 50 80s, and it was very similar to Mexico City, but it was just one portion from the El Rio Grande up to Santa Fe and Taos. That's all, like maybe 20 towns in a straight line down south. But all around the Rio Grande, it was uh, native territory,
Mm.
hard to conquer. Actually, the ones that helped the Mexicans control the territory was when the American, the Anglo-Saxon people, and the immigrants from Irish and Scotland, they defeat with the new weapons in the 1860s, 1870s, the defeat of the ancient people, the original people of Texas, Oklahoma. It was accomplished.
Oh, because the British settlers, the European settlers, they came and they helped the Spanish defeat.
They were together.
Oh man. So Mexico was established, the government there was established by the Spanish?
Yeah, it was established by the Spanish, and then in 1810, the story goes the Mexican independence. But what happened is that the sons of the Spanish, we call criollos.
Hmm.
In Mexico is a very divided country. You just mentioned it, and that's the point that you try to reach. Is we are a racist country. I believe in Mexico there is more racism than here in the United States. I'm from Mexico, and we have levels, stratus, right? The black people, Indian people, mixed people, white people, Spanish white people, and maybe the higher level or your color of your skin defines your status,
Hmm.
right? So in 1810, there were like in the study ID maybe 4,500 Spaniards from Spain. They had all the rights, and 1 million Spaniards born in Mexico. So white people, but they don't have documents that they were in Spain. They were born in Nueva España. That's what Mexico used to be called Nueva España.
Hmm.
So their son of the Spaniards, actually, they defeat the Spaniards, kick it out the continent, and they rule on Mexico. So the Mexican didn't rule, just a group of people, an ethnicity that is white, we call Criollo people. They've been controlling Mexico for all Latin America. This is political too. All Latin America for over 200 years. It's an elite, right? So they continue the same colonization process.
That is wild. And then, so the people that are running these countries, none of them are actually originally from there. Okay.
Mhm.
So very similar to America.
Mhm.
Yeah. Um, I
But,
didn't
but,
know
but
that.
it's a different color because I studied in Mexico and I studied here. So I see a few differences because the Catholicism and the Spanish tradition is more different than the British Anglo-Saxon way of rule. Like the Spanish, they mix. They say I mix. They say I'm more human, but you're gonna be my slave. And the British people say, you know what? I respect you, but can you move over there?
I would have to say it's a little. I would disagree a little bit
Is
with your
that?
statement,
Mhm,
but that is a as a because they came and they enslaved the indigenous people in South America, Central America, where in North America they did not enslave us, but that's because they brought over African slaves who then
mhm,
they enslaved, and with us they couldn't defeat us, and so they were forced to sign treaties with us,
mhm,
which then they used backhanded, like backdoor contract deals that we
mhm,
didn't understand at the time because we're not writing up contracts to
mhm,
own land, you know. So they just slowly had more and more people move in to the
mhm,
point where we kind of like didn't even have a choice. They just moved onto our land. So yeah, I would say that it was more sneaky backhand deals where they
mhm,
stole our land, and with you guys, they just straight up murdered you and forced you in chains. It sounds
mhm.
like, and that is hardcore.
I agree with you, but at the same time, when you study history, you had to see it through time. Sometimes it's easy to say 500 years, and you try to put it in the same picture. The French has this word mentalite. You had to go right on time. When the Spanish came was in the 1500s, well, 1600s. When actually the Anglo-Saxon people start cover all the line, when they start moving, it was in the 1800s. When actually so it was like 200 years of different in knowledge and technology and in the way how they want to treat the natives, plus the people that Southern North America, they were like more like illustrated. So I agree with you, it was little by little,
Mm-hmm.
little by little, right? The end, it was almost the same: destruction, colonization. Like what happened in these cultures here, when we go to ceremonies, we listen to the elders, to the abuelos, and yeah, you know the story because you had interviewed these people, I imagine. They were put in schools, forced to learn, right? But it was 100 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
recently, and
Less than 100 years
less
ago.
and they made movies.
Up until the 1974 was the
Mhm,
last church,
mhm,
which is that means there's people alive today that were in those churches. There's people alive today that were the priest in those churches.
mhm.
Yeah.
So we can say that we never conquer. The people in the north, the people in the south, we never conquer. They were defeated in many battles, right? But 100 years ago, and Mexico was 400 years earlier,
Mm-hmm.
you see? But the people is still struggling. So if the people is still conducting our ceremony, if we still conducting our ceremonies, praying and connecting with nature, even though we were defeated, incarcerated, and sometimes ethnic cleansing, which is very different than genocide, uh, we still here. So I got this for a teacher. We never been conquered.
I like that, and I would agree. We may have lost a battle, but we never lost the war, and we're still here fighting. That and this conversation right here proves it. So, um, what does the fight look like today for the Nahua people?
Mm. There is two ways. The way I see it, first is the economic survival, and the other one is the identity. In Mexico, they just give you one choice mostly. You wanna get a better economic way. You wanna be part of the country. Lose your identity. Lose your language. Be Mexican like us. That's a big pressure. Or you wanna keep your identity as indigenous population and be isolated from the main country that listen música norteña, cumbias, you know, that's the mainstream. So as a group, what is you want to do? So if you became wholly Mexican, you had whole rights as the Mexican population, but then you start losing. So the communities, they're in a battle. Like colonization is an ongoing process.
Yeah, the it seems like there has been a growing Mexican pride, which is good. It's not a bad thing,
Mhm,
but which is taken away from the indigenous side of things. And
mhm,
when you look at, there's a trend going on TikTok right now where it's 23andMe, and people are getting their DNA results.
mhm,
And the average Mexican person has like 50% indigenous DNA.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a lot more than a lot of people who claim to be native in North America today. They're going in, like, for me, I have 50% blood because my dad is full and my mom, she isn't, but
Mm-hmm.
there's like a lot of cousins or people who are registered to my tribe, they might have 30%. They're not 100%. And so when you think about it in that regard, these are indigenous people that are now coinciding with their colonizer, because that's all they know. They don't know their indigenous history.
Yeah, I got a teacher to say that we are the colonizers. We are colonized, and then we are colonizing people. We were the feeders, and then we defeat our people. So when you this is, history is very very it's hard. And I had a saying in Spanish, but I don't know if I can tell it in English. Is si quieres conocer la verdad, mereces el castigo de encontrarla. Can you translate? It's like if he,
She doesn't know
if you want to find the truth, you deserve the punishment to find it.
Oh, okay.
What happened in Mexico? That the Spanish didn't conquer Mexico, man. The nation around Mexico conquered themselves. It was a civil war,
Mm-hmm.
right? So the Spanish came unite with the Tlaxcaltecas. The Tlaxcaltecas and the Spanish. The, Actually, the Tlaxcaltecas unite 40,000 people, 40,000 indigenous Central Mexican people against the Mexica people.
Oh.
With the help only 1,000 Spaniards. So the story, the official story says the Spanish conquered the Aztecs. But when you read, you see Istlizochil was the Texcoco leader, and he bring 20,000 warriors. He know all the tactics. He know how the weather. He know the tradition, right? So I won't explain here because it will take a long time. But actually, the defeat of the Mexica people was done for the people around them because they hate each other with the help of the few Spaniards.
That is,
Right?
so the indigenous people helped the Spaniards conquer themselves,
Yeah, yeah.
and ultimately it backfired on them.
Mm-hmm. They
Yeah.
didn't know that in the other continent were millions of people. They didn't know. They saw the Spaniards, the Tlaxcalans, they always want to be like the Mexica. And they saw the Spaniards, oh yeah, an ally was a good opportunity, and they unify all the people. The story is amazing. Nation tras nation, uniting, Xochimilcans, Cholultecas, uniting against the Aztecs. When the Mexica. When the Mexica were defeated, then the Mexica people, it was another thing. You had to think like them. It's very strange. If I fight with you, I don't know in the north because I'm a lecturer in the north tradition, but in the south, if I fought with you, and you defeat me, then I am your ally, and then I help you to defeat your enemy.
And so that's how the Aztec Empire grew, by basically defeating nearby nations, growing in power, and slowly taking over.
Mm.
And so that's why the other indigenous people rose up to basically fight them, is
Mm-hmm.
because they didn't want to be conquered themselves by the Aztec.
Or they want to be the conquerors too.
Okay, so in that regard, Mexico today, if they never rose up and helped the Spaniards defeat the Aztecs, instead of it being in Mexico, it would be like Azteca.
Or maybe Tlaxcalan, or maybe Purepecha,
Mm.
because they tried to unite, but they couldn't unite the Mexica and the Purepecha. So the Purepecha were defeated. Actually, they didn't even fight with the Spaniards. They say, okay, we want to be your allies. And then the Mexica, the Tlaxcalans, and the Purepecha went south to Guatemala, defeat the Mayans
The
from
Mayans.
Guatemala. And then a group of mainly Tlaxcalan, I'm talking about 5,000 soldiers, 10,000 soldiers in expeditions with 300 Spaniards, maybe, or less. They went up to New Mexico, now we call New Mexico, and defeat the Pueblo people. And every place that they were establishing towns, mixed towns, with the new colonizer Tlaxcalans and the Spanish.
Yeah, they did that in California all the way up, and I just interviewed. I talked about this already. Sean Milanovic,
Mhm,
and he's Kauai, and they did that to the Kauai people over there in the desert, where they went and they took their lands, they took their women, they
mhm,
took their farms,
mhm,
and they just made it their own. This was the Mexicans at that time because it was no longer, it wasn't just the Spanish anymore. It was
mhm,
now the Mexican government at that time that were having their people move north. And
mhm,
yeah, and I think that's when it leads into the Mexican American War eventually, when that became Mexico, right? Texas
mhm,
and parts of California.
mhm.
Hmm.
So, like I say, is if you want to study history, you have to go in detail, and you have to be prepared because sometimes it's painful
Yeah.
when you listen to these things, right? So the point is that Mexico became an aspirational society. Aspirational society is it's something the Spanish brought to Mexico. Is that if you were lighter, then you grow up in the social scale, and they got it for the religion. I don't want to go into detail, but I had a study that they call limpieza de sangre, cleanness of your skin, because they conquered the Muslim people in Spain. Spain was conquered by Muslims, right? And then Spain took over. They call it la reconquista, and they expelled all the Muslim people. Pero millions of Muslim Arabs, or maybe from North Africa, stay in Spain. That's why Spain is a mixed country, very mixed country. So what they did, they asked these people, if you want to stay here in Spain, you have to become Catholic. And the Muslim people, and you people didn't agree at the beginning, but then they started agreeing. And the Spanish said, you know what? But you have to prove me that you're Catholic, and they give you papers, like here in green cards. They give you papers. Okay, you're Catholic now. But if you had a kid, your kid has to have that paper that you were Catholic. So every generation started losing the religion, the Muslim, and the Spanish believe that they were no Muslim but Catholics, right? That took years. So it's a process that they lose their religion, the Muslim people, and became Catholics by 1800. So the same tactic they use in Mexico, bearing blood. First, when the Spanish came mixed with an Indian, they call it mestizo, right? And I said before that one Spaniard have a kid, they became a criollo. But one mestizo with the black people, they became a mulatto. Then a mulatto con un mestizo, they became a lobo. And the Spanish start making paintings. I make a study. Those paintings are in Mexico City, by the way. They paint all mixed races.
They're just like creating races at this point up in their head as if we're freaking crossbreeding dogs, it sounds
Yeah,
like.
names like Salta para atrás, Tente el aire, crazy names.
Yeah.
Coyote, Lobo, Mestizo, Guanaco. Some names stuck. Even the name Cholo come from the area. Cholo means a mestizo from Mexico, then in 1760 arrived in California, and in indigenous people from California, when they mix together, it's a Cholo. And the word stays up to today.
No way.
Yeah. So we call it la sociedad de
That's not the
castas.
version of Cholo I've seen in California.
They they don't know.
Yeah.
They don't know.
That's
So these names, the Spanish has a society of castas. I mentioned Indians, blacks, Indian. Castas mean mixed people. All can the Spanish get tired of naming them and say, okay, castas and white people, criollo or Spanish.
yeah, it's a wonder, what people were thinking back then. It's just, well, it all centers around narcissism,
Mhm,
obviously, and wanting to be the apex, the top of
mhm,
the food chain. But that's a lot of energy to put into recreating and renaming
mhm.
people, all based off of skin color.
But if you let me finish, because it's very important, is I want you to think how the Mexican people think and why they don't change the mentality, because we're 300 years on imposing the aspirational society. Like you aspire to be better. And they say if you are Indian, you can become white. So marry a white person, a whitest person, right? And they start cleaning their blood, like every time marrying a person with a fair skin. Up to my time when I was in Mexico City 30 years ago, it was the same thing. Cásate con una blanquita, marry a white girl, so you can better up the race. After 300 years, and still that mentality in Mexico because that was imposed. And, and, and let me explain you in more detail. In Mexico, you try to be white. If you are Indian with 60% of Indian blood, but you are fair skin, you're white. The reverse is in here. You are an example. You are Mexico, they think you are American. You're white. They don't know. But here you decide to be Indian. You don't want to be whitish.
Well, yeah, actually, when I was younger,
Mm-hmm.
I was told by even teachers. I was told by teachers. I was told by just adults in my life that not to identify as native, and not
Mm-hmm.
to, and on my documents when I fill out
Mm-hmm.
what I am,
Mm-hmm.
put white and tell people I'm white. And when I go to job interviews and I'm applying for a job, tell them I'm white. Don't ever. They would always tell me to hide my nativeness.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until I became an adult and I felt a connection to spirit and something deeper than
Mm-hmm.
this, because I wasn't connecting to white culture in the same way. And that's when I really started getting into my indigenous roots, and I started realizing that I shouldn't be ashamed of my indigenous culture. I should
Mm-hmm.
embrace it, because I'm more indigenous than I am anything else, and I can feel my ancestors around me, and
Mm-hmm.
I can feel the river from my indigenous lands running through my veins. And so I need to embody that and learn about it. But so yeah, there is that racism that still goes on today in America, and even in my tribe, um, there's a lot of people who will go and try to wash out their blood,
Mm-hmm.
because the natives from where I am are dark. They're not fair skinned, and
Mm-hmm.
so you'll see a lot of people will marry someone white and start trying to have whiter and whiter kids,
Mm-hmm.
because um, the darker skin in America, up until very recently, you're gonna get in trouble. You're gonna get pulled over by the cops. You're gonna probably go to jail.
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of family members, that they have records, because it doesn't matter what's going on. You can get pulled over just by
Mm-hmm.
driving down the street, and they're gonna find a reason.
Yeah.
So you're not gonna get the same job opportunities when your name is Horse
Mm-hmm.
versus if your name's John.
Yeah.
So uh, yeah, we're getting away from that. That's the point of this podcast, is decolonization, and
Mm-hmm.
it's getting people to embrace their indigeneity and not feel like they need to hide it. And it's at least we know that we're together in this, South America and North America, Central America, where we all before we had to hide our indigenous
Mm-hmm.
roots, and now it's coming out, and we can stand together and
Mm.
embrace it.
But I see in the way I see it, I've been living the United States 30 years ago. I can tell you a story because you mentioned it because you're living your society. But I see more freedom here to express yourself and say, I'm an Indian, I'm Native American. And I feel proud of it. In Mexico, from my experience, it's not the same thing. It's even that you're Indian, you don't want to be Indian. You want to be Mexican, which means white, or try to be as white as possible. Dyeing your hair, changing your clothes. And I see in my hand, for example, one of my first wife, she's Indian from Oaxaca. When she got to Mexico City, 10 years old, she spoke only Zapotec, and she learned Spanish in Mexico. And when I see it, then I married her when she was like 20. I didn't know her story until she told me, I am indigenous people, but I was afraid to speak my language.
Do you feel like it's changing now, more now that it will? You just got a new president. Well, not you
Mm-hmm.
specifically, but Mexico just
Mm-hmm.
got a new president now. She's Jewish, but the president before her was an indigenous person. And do you feel like once he took into office, things began to change for the positive?
Yeah, it started changing for the positive, not as much as we want. Actually, I work with a lot of teachers in my podcast and my group. There are a lot of teachers for we call SEP, Secretaría de Educación Pública, the school program, the school institution that define the education. Right there is the colonialism. They try to teach people Spanish only, Mexican root, one identity, right? So these teachers now with AMLO, we call AMLO the president, he's leaving. he didn't change the laws. I was expecting a educational reform, like changing, but he was flexible. He allowed the teachers to teach what they think is correct for the kids in the indigenous community, but Mexico is very big. In the cities, it's different, right? But in the indigenous communities are around in the towns and small cities, the teachers, they can teach mostly what they think is adequate for the kids. If they put in our programs, the way we teach the Tonalpowali, a lot of the dance and new things, even the Nahua people. I have a teacher, my Nahua teacher, he teach Nahua for his kid. He's a bilingual teacher. So I know this for first hand. Yes, it was an advance. Not as we wanted, but it was an advance.
So he didn't officially change the curriculum, but
Mm.
he allowed teachers within their own discretion to
Sí.
yeah. But that just also means there's a large number of people who are learning the incorrect version of history.
Mm.
They have a lot of that going on up north too, where they're kind of rewriting. Well, they already rewrote it, but they're deleting more and more history as it goes. So the kids, as they get older, are not learning about the Trail of Tears or manifest destiny in the right way. But
Mm.
so that is something that we got to come together and change.
Mm-hmm.
I saw that he now allows for some tribes to be federally recognized. I want to say there's about 24 or 26 tribes in Mexico that are now officially federally recognized tribes on the tribal listing
Mm.
that he did. So that's important.
Yeah, he's given right. But the thing is, Mexico is a diverse country. I've been here, but I studied in Mexico, and there is a right wing community. Remember that there's always the Criollo people. Now I calculate there are like 20 million people in Mexico. I go always by statistics. We are like 120 people, 100 million people. Roughly 20% I fair skin, and they claim themselves Spanish people, Criollo. They feel proud of themselves, and they want to see the Indians as before, servers only, workers, right?
Hmm.
Maybe another 20%, there are mixed people that are between one side and the other one, right? And the 60% of the population, mostly indigenous people. But these indigenous people are colonized people. They think themselves as white people. They want to be white, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I immigrated in 1980s, 1990s in Mexico, and what I want to learn, what is happening in Mexico, what you're doing here, what we're doing, impossible to see. It was a dream for me. Now it's a dream. I see no education, indigenous people segregated, no schools, But now I see everywhere people awakening, people recovering their ancient history, remembering. We call remembering.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's happening in Mexico. So it's like a little sparkles everywhere, but it's not like in a massive way, massive, like the whole people know. The Mexican culture, the main culture is very strong.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're doing a lot for your culture, and it seems like sparking that light into people's eyes out here with your ceremonies that you're leading out here. Um, as when I first began really connecting with my culture, my tribe is up north. It's in Humboldt County, and currently I live down here in Southern California.
Mm-hmm.
So the only ceremonies that I'm able to go to are the ones that are local that I go to my fiance,
Mm.
and a lot of those happen to be led by you. And so I appreciate you helping me on my journey, even though we have different cultures. Um, you want to talk a little bit about the ceremonies that you do down here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, first I want to thank the elders because I was taught by them. I think that we are lucky, and I call it the ripple effect. It's like when you see the water is very calm, and in now what is called akexamani, when the water is not moving the water, right? Or somebody just threw a rock on it, and then the ripples start. Somehow, when you start that movement, when you spoke up, the wind, the heka, that's what you're doing with your podcast. So the words spread, go in all directions. So for some reason, we believe in times. Every cycle starts. And a few years ago, a cycle opens and allows the teachers to share the knowledge. Before, the teachers, the abuelos, the grandfathers, the elders, they didn't share the knowledge because maybe they weren't ready, or people, or they thought the people weren't ready to accept that knowledge. But if you notice, most of the abuelos everywhere they are sharing now
Mm-hmm.
to everybody, and in a communication using technology, right? So some abuelos in la montaña alta de Guerrero, right in the mountains, they spoke Nahua, their native language. I can say less polluted than other people. They start sharing these ceremonies. They say to my teacher, you know what? It's okay to share with the people. You can share it with the people that you think they're gonna share with other people. So somehow he said, you know what? You wanna learn this thing? Yes, I wanna learn. I wanna learn how to do my ceremonies because I forgot. So he said, okay. And we started journeying or learning how to do it the way they do it. Doesn't mean that's the way everybody has to do it. It's the people for La Montaña de Guerrero, they spoke Nahua, and they do, uh, and they divide the education of the people, or like the medicine wheel. They had the same circle 4 times every 13 years. We had to go I think they call it the Rio Passage. But from the year you were born to year 13, this is the first stage in your life. You're a seed that was planted, you became a little tree. 13 to 26, then you're a tree that grows already, but it doesn't give fruits. So it needs to be nurtured still. For 26 to 39, then you become a tree that can give fruit, right? And then for 39 to 52, then you are a big tree that people go around you and find shade and comfort. So that's the whole cycle, 52 years. So we need to make at least those 4 ceremonies in July.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the main that's the ceremonies I'm focusing. At the beginning, when you are born, you need to be rejutonal. It's very important. It's the time and the energy that happened when you were born. Some people call horoscope or astrology. No, it's very different. So that's the main ceremony when you were born. After you were born, you wait 80 years, and we read you. We call it Yutonal, and then 13 years old, again we read the tonal, and you give the name of the to the child, and then for 26, that's the ceremony that we do to Raquel. 26 to 39, that's the second stage, and then you can take another name. So when you're 13, you can have one name, right? But as you changing your personality, you changing your attitudes, and then you can have another name. At 39, you can have another name.
No, that does make sense. I feel like you do definitely grow and change in waves. So yeah, you are involved in a mental health or mental wellness organization, right? Or because I know you used to do events with Tata G.
Yeah, we had people like that, but directly I'm not involved with them. Through Tata G, I help them, but hopefully we want to connect with them because through ceremonies we
Mm-hmm.
can help each other.
Okay, because I think he was doing. There's a lot of grants and programs out there for people who want to start organizations that are specifically surrounding like indigenous mental health and mental wellness. So I was curious if you were also taking part in something like that.
No, no, not yet. That's a field that I don't know. I can't tell what I don't know. But I think it's very needed. I went to a few ceremonies with Tata G, and I knew a couple of people that actually have a degree, and they were jumping into that field. They were helping people with psychology problems, but with a specific role and name. I forgot what was the name, psychological
Uh,
ethnicity, something like that. It's a field already, yes.
oh, like psychiatrist maybe or psychologist.
Psychiatrist or
Mm.
therapy, ancestral therapy.
Mm.
That's another name. But I don't know exactly how they're performing right now, but I see it as a very, very good venue. He doing it through government, but you can do it through individual practice, which is what we're doing in the ceremony.
Mm-hmm.
In the ceremony, we're doing it with no help of anybody. It's ourselves. People that need help can over. But I think it's a lot of future in that field.
Yeah. So what does the future look like with where do you want to go and where do you want to take this movement?
Mm. Like you say, and you rhyme, and everything in this universe moves in waves. As long as we go and understand that, we're gonna go and move in that way. So we don't go against the current, right? I think it's gonna. We got a bright future. We are renewing, but most importantly, is that we need to grow the spiritual part. I began in the educational part, and they began in the cultural part. Culture, right? Try to recover the culture, but that's not the whole thing. And then when I started going deeper, and then when I went to the meaning of ceremony, is that you had to become a strong person in the four levels, mainly in your spirit. If you are not strongly from the inside, if you're not integrity, you don't have complete integrity as a person, righteousness, justice. We call centrality, el centrador. We got a deity, it's called Chutecutli. Then you can go beyond the whatever you want to accomplish. You want to be always doing small ceremonies or danza. We call folklore. That's folklore. But what we really need to change is the spirit. That we need to tell to the people, this is a spirituality, right? We don't have religion. Those people have churches. A lot we respect that. I respect that they have the churches, synagogues, pagodas. We don't have it, and we need to have a place to do our circus ceremonies. This is our church. So the future for me is open the spirituality in people. The beginning is, oh, you like culture, you like education. Look, this is history. But as people start becoming more interested in the history, even the politics, oh, we need to recover our rights. Yes, it's important. But you need to be inside strong. So the light comes from the inside. This is my main goal. I see it. We need to become a spiritual people and a strong spiritual people. So we won't be defeated easily enough.
That's powerful. I think that spirit is the reason why we haven't been defeated.
Mm-hmm.
Because you could push us into a corner, but you can't break our spirits.
Mm-hmm.
And the spiritual journey is a tough one. It's a constant battle. Well, I don't even know if battle is the right word to say, but it's definitely a constant work
Mm-hmm.
towards progressing. And and it gets deeper. And as soon as you think that you've learned a lot or as much as you think that there is to learn, then you enter a new stage and realize you know nothing.
A teacher say is while I learn more, I I know more.
Mm-hmm.
The more I know, the more I don't know, and I think that's the target, you know, spirituality.
That's beautiful. Well, I think that's a good place to end our conversation. I appreciate you for allowing me to come here and have this conversation. I learned a lot today, and that was really amazing. So,
Now, thanks to you for letting me share for the little I know. Thank you, Dylan.
yeah.